Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, we are used to many events having been rescheduled because of COVID. That was not the case with local elections, though. They were rescheduled because of Hurricane Ida. Well, tomorrow, voters finally get to make their choices. We will examine some of the key contested elections, and speaking of COVID, we'll get an update including hospital numbers. We'll also hear the latest on an ongoing investigation of the Sewerage and Water Board. Elsewhere, there was good news about Carnival, and we'll look at changes and consistencies in mayoral elections. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Jessica Williams, Deputy Investigations Editor, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. Greg LaRose, Investigative Reporter, WDSU TV, Channel 6. And David Hammer, Investigative Reporter, WWL-TV, Channel 4. Let's go on over to Greg first for the latest on COVID. Our numbers are encouraging, but we still can't feel like it's all over, because it's not.
Right, Marcia. I think we see the encouraging numbers and we kind of are wondering, is this turning the corner? And, we're all hopeful to hear from public health officials that, yes, this is finally it. But no, not the case. But let's, go with the good news here. Louisiana is tops in the nation in terms of hospitalizations per 100,000 residents. 5 per 100,000 is the rate where Louisiana finds itself. Compare that to the national average of 14. Our numbers just this week, as of Friday, we had 213 people hospitalized. Keep in mind, back in August, the surge was past 3,000, just 30-something on ventilators. So encouraging news here in the present, but again, public health officials, they feel as though another surge is around the corner as we get through Thanksgiving and into the holiday season, people closer together, and they just keep encouraging vaccinations. They feel that's the way where we bring those numbers down on a more prolonged basis.
Right. That's what we keep hearing, is vaccinations is really the way to go. I mean, we are hearing of the discovery of new treatments, the pills that have come out that are seeking approval for. But still, the bottom line is the best way to protect yourself is to get vaccinated. And now little kids can get vaccinated, ages 5 up.
Yeah, and we're seeing and hearing anecdotally that there's high interest there. One thing I found in looking over the vaccination stats, and it's going to be interesting to see how this 5 through 11 population pans out, we see the highest rates in folks who are 65 and older. And it makes sense. They are the most vulnerable to the really bad outcomes from COVID-19. And their rate is in the 80th percentile. And it steps its way downward with the younger age groups. When you get into, say, the 18 to 29 age group, you're in the 30th percentile there. So the hope, obviously, is that, with the younger kids who, not entirely invulnerable to this, and there have been isolated incidents where there have been really bad outcomes. The idea is that they can also spread COVID even if they don't actually have the worst outcomes from it.
And boosters, now the availability for boosters is a little bit spread out now, more than just the 65 and over or those with high risk. Right,
and I think you're seeing a good steady flow of people coming back. But the question hanging over the entire discussion is, where does natural immunity fit into all of this? How long does that last? How long will the immunity from this third booster last? So I think the science is saying that ultimately this might land us like it does with flu season, that in addition to getting your annual flu shot, you'll likely get an annual COVID-19 booster. The research is ongoing, and it'll be interesting to see just how frequent the boosters will be.
I wanted to mention that about the flu shots, because a lot of people are wondering if they still need to get their booster, then how about the flu shot? And my doctor said you can get them both at the same time. That's okay. So.
Yeah, Joe Cantor is out spreading that message. Another thing he mentioned this week, or actually last week, ahead of the beginning of vaccines for 5 to 11-year-olds, were some stats as it involves children and the rate of mortality just before that vaccine was introduced. For example, with varicella chickenpox, for ages 5 to 9, there were 16 deaths annually before, in those 5 or so years before the vaccine came online. That same rate for COVID-19 in that age group is 66 deaths. So he's out hammering that message to ensure that, parents shouldn't just look the other way and think that this is something that kids can easily get over.
Right. Well, the bottom line, it still is a concern. But, 2 years out now, just about, from when this, appeared on the scene, COVID-19, there has been progress made, and we can protect ourselves, which is good news.
True.
All right. Thanks a lot, Greg. Okay, let's go on over to Jessica, because we finally, elections now, elections for, in the city of New Orleans, mayor, council, and then statewide for constitutional amendments. And so we're going to talk about that. So let's talk about the mayor's race.
That's right. It's been a long wait, but tomorrow voters will finally get to decide who they would like to choose for mayor for some of these city council seats. There's also some other races on the ballot, including sheriff, clerk of criminal court. And really for the mayor's race, this would be LaToya Cantrell's bid for a second term. There have not been any major challengers that have come out against her, which means the election is really a referendum on her leadership, and whether or not voters agree with some of the decisions that she's made over the past 4 years, and whether they think she deserves another term. And of course, it's very rare in New Orleans for an incumbent mayor not to be reelected again. The widespread expectation is that she will easily win reelection, particularly because of how she has handled COVID-19 in the last year. The restrictions that she's put in place are seen by many residents as an appropriate measure, a guardrail to ensure that the virus did not spiral out of control in the city. And then you've got, of course, the council races. There are really where a lot of the action is happening this election cycle because they're so competitive. 2 of the seats are open because you have Jason Williams, who went over to become the district attorney earlier this year, leaving his at-large seat open. That attracted 3 high-profile challengers, Jared Brissett, Kristen Gisselson-Palmer, both of whom already serve on the council, and former State Senator J.P. Morrell, who many remember from his 14 years in the legislature, working on a host of issues, including working to overturn the state's non-unanimous jury rule. Right. Secondly, lastly, there's Bart Everson in that race. And really, it's a question there of whether or not there's going to be a runoff or whether or not JP is going to win it outright. Lots of folks widely view him as the most formidable challenger in that race. But Kristen has really run an aggressive campaign. She made an unprecedented cross-endorsement of Jared Brissett, clearly a political maneuver to try to sour voters on JP, who polls had shown was doing very well at that point. It remains to be seen tomorrow whether that tactic is actually something that's going to work. And then moving over into district.
And I think we should note, too, that Jared Brissett, he did suspend his campaign, right, although his name is still on the ballot.
His name is still going to be on the ballot. He did suspend his campaign after he was arrested a 3rd time for driving while drunk. I believe it was October 18th, not long after Kristen announced her endorsement of him. Right. So that was just added another layer of intrigue to a race that's already being widely watched in the city.
All right, for the district races now.
Then we've got district races. We've got District B, where the incumbent Jay Banks is facing off against 2 really well-funded challengers, Leslie Harris and Rella Zaplatal. Roz Thibodeau is also running, but has not attracted the type of attention or the funding that the other 2 opponents to Jay have attracted. And that's really going to be a difficult race for him. The first time when he got in 4 years ago, it was really a nail-biter. He won, by just a dozen or so votes against the contender then. And the district has gotten even more of a shift in terms of its racial demographics since then. And more folks, he's obviously got a record now that folks can either decide that they approve of or they disapprove of. And his 2 higher profile challengers have made no secret of their feelings about him and why they think he should not be allowed to have another 4 years.
And C.
Moving on to District C, 8 contenders in that race. The leading candidate in most folks' estimation there is Freddie King, who has locked up a lot of the higher profile endorsements, including Governor Edwards, Congressman Troy Carter, State Representative Gary Carter, That seat is really a heavily seat that's based in Algiers. There's been probably not an East Bank candidate to emerge to represent District C in about 30 years. Freddie King would be, the next in a long tradition of West Bank folks to represent that district. And his closest contender, I'd probably say, in that race is Alonzo Knox, who's also gathered a good bit of support. The other contenders have done well for themselves, but have not seen the type of funding that Mr. Knox has seen.
And we should note there's also a race for District A, and that's Joe Giarrusso, who's the incumbent, the strong incumbent.
He's a very strong incumbent and does not expect to see any significant opposition.
Okie doke. Let's go on over to, thanks, Jessica, and we're coming back to you for the other district races too and state amendments. But first I want to go over to E and talk a little bit about mayoral elections in the city of New Orleans.
Well, to understand the history of mayor's elections in New Orleans, a significant year was 1954, and that was when the new home rule charter was passed. And that charter limited mayors to 2 4-year terms. Prior to that, there wasn't any term limit. Delesseps Morrison was mayor at the time. He was allowed to finish off his terms and then run for 2 more terms. But the thing is that since then, every mayor has been elected to 2 terms. The pattern is followed. So in that period, there's been 9 mayors of New Orleans, which isn't a whole lot during such a long period. I was figuring out during that same period, there have been 13 presidents and 13 governors. Now, 3 of them were Edwin Edwards, who kept on getting reelected. And so the New Orleans mayor's office has been fairly stable. Even Ray Nagin, when he ran for a second time in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, who seemed to be in real trouble, was reelected. And there were also 2 father and son sets that were elected with the Morials and in the Landrews. But I think what this does for New Orleans politics, if you get in and if you do okay, that the voters and the people who want to be mayor are going to give you that second term and then come out full blast 4 years from now, which is what I expect is going to happen. This is going to be a fairly easy election for Cantrell. And I think she knew that was probably the way it was going to go if history is an indication of the way it works out. There's one office that was created in '54, which is the Council at Large race. And I think a lot of people thought, well, that would be kind of an automatic stepping stone to being mayor. And it hasn't happened that much. Vic Skiro, Moon Landrew, Sidney Bartholomew were elected, but most of the mayors haven't come from that position. But still, whoever is elected council at large in this election, when the election is over, I think it's going to be perceived as being a front runner in 4 years from now.
Okay, so we'll see this weekend what the next chapter in the Office of New Orleans Mayor will be. Okay, E, thanks a lot. David, over to you. And you've been delving into investigations into Sewerage and Water Board again, but also city inspectors, and this time it's dealing with a real important safety issue, and that's gas and gas hookups.
Yeah, Marcia, it's been a really extraordinary week plus here. I've done a lot of investigations over the years, and this is the first time that an investigation I did forced the FBI to come in and do a raid of the Sewerage and Water Board as they did last Friday. We started out with this investigation months and months ago, and about a week before we started the airing the investigations last week, we questioned them about it. This has to do with the permitting department at the Sewerage and Water Board, which handles plumbing permits. Those people, the head of that department, Jay Arnold, and one of his deputies, Vernon Marcotte, are also gas fitters. So they have licenses to be private gas installers, but they weren't doing the work, it appears. They were providing their licenses to people who did not have those gas fitting licenses. So it raises this question about hundreds and hundreds of jobs being done over the last several years with installing gas lines. And as you say, that's a safety issue. Gas is very dangerous, natural gas hookups. We've seen homes explode when the gas is not connected properly or there's a leak. We specifically looked at some of the cases where There were pressure gauges on those gas hookups that had to be inspected, and they were not set properly according to the code, so we don't know if they were tested properly for leaks, or the inspector didn't wait the requisite 10 minutes to check and see if there was a loss in pressure that would indicate a leak. So there's all kinds of real-world issues here dealing with hundreds and hundreds of properties, and the reason the Sewerage and Water Board is involved is because this is all a web of self-dealing where you have plumbing inspectors who are inspecting the work of plumbers on one side, and you have licensed plumbers on the other side that are inspecting the work of gas fitters who are working in the Sewerage and Water Board. And it's a very complex thing, but it is individuals who are appearing to work in cahoots to do work that they're not supposed to be doing.
And there's a link to the city, also, city department as
Right,
well.
so the city's Safety and Permits Department is responsible for checking those gas installations. And it's very strange, Marcia, because a lot of people don't know you have this one-stop app online where you can check permits for buildings and electrical and mechanical inspections and permits. And people don't realize that the plumbing is handled separately by the Sewerage and Water Board.
Yeah.
And so you can do a whole house project, a brand new house, and everything is handled by the city's Safety and Permits Office except for the plumbing. And so that is handled by the Sewerage and Water Board's plumbing department, where all of the records are paper only, on index cards and paper. And that's why the FBI had to go in there within 10 hours of our story airing, where we were naming these people who had these control over those records, and seize those records because they had to make sure that nothing happened to them.
And had to haul boxes and boxes out. I mean, how does that even exist today, to have something that's only, and something that is so important, a public record like that, only on index cards and not electronically?
Well, it appears that you could only assume that it was by design, because a lot of those documents, we've been trying for months to get access to those records. We've fought with the Sewerage and Water Board to get access to those records and had a very difficult time doing it. We're not allowed in to look at those records, and they were really controlled by Jay Arnold and his staff. And now we see that Jay Arnold and his staff were dealing privately on the side with the plumbers themselves and approving their work and getting their work approved by, in one case that I detailed, a city mechanical inspector who was also a plumber whose work was being approved on the other end. So you see that it's going in both directions, and they're relying on each other, and they're getting paid.
So the investigation will unfold, and we'll be hearing more about this, what outcomes there are. But immediately, the issue is safety. As you've said over and over again, gas is really, it can be a very dangerous thing if not worked with properly. Are a lot of places in New Orleans now going to have to be re-inspected?
It appears so. We identified one person who was doing work without the proper permits and without the proper licenses, I should say, and he had 300 open permits. So now the city says they're going to have to go back in and re-inspect all of those. They also suspended the mechanical inspector, Buddy Fresh, who we highlighted in our pieces. So that's going to raise questions about his work, and he's going to be looked at and having his license taken away by the state. So that hearing is coming up later this month.
And of course, Safety and Permits has had its issues over these past months of years that you've delved into, so it just continues.
It's just a whole other avenue now. We've talked about the pumps and the power and all of their problems with billing, and now it's a whole new avenue. It's their plumbing department and their utility services administration, and whether they're going to continue with that. And it looks like the city is trying to seize those responsibilities away from the Sewerage and Water Board and do that in-house along with the rest of the inspections and permitting process.
Okay, we'll see what the future brings. Thanks a lot, David. Jessica, over to you, and let's continue with our discussion about the elections for City Council in New Orleans and also state amendments. to the
That's
Constitution.
right. We've got District D, which is another race that's wide open. If you recall, Jared Brossett decided not to pursue, he was actually term limited and decided to pursue a at-large seat on the council. So that race has attracted an astonishing 14 candidates.
That's a lot.
And it's interesting because each of these candidates has sort of had to fight to get funding for their bids. They're all first time, folks that are seeking their first political office, save for Eugene Green and maybe one other. But we are seeing some grassroots support coalesce around Timberland Sams, as well as Mariah Moore. And Troy Glover. And of course, Eugene is someone who has been in local politics a while, has run for a good bit of local races, but has not had success thus far. So we'll see how that's going to go. More than likely, it's going to be a runoff with that many candidates.
Yeah, okay. Do you want to go on? And I mean,
sure.
while we're still there, I mean, any other candidates that sort of are to the fore a little bit? That's quite a group there of 14. I mean, Timberland Sams, I know, was involved with the Neighborhood Partnership Network, right?
That's right. She led that organization after Katrina, which really helped local neighborhoods advocate for not to be erased off of the map when Katrina hit and when a lot of discussion was going on about which neighborhoods to bring back and which to be converted into green space. We also see in the District D race, and I mentioned Troy Glover, Mariah Moore, Mark Laws is someone who I've seen also attract some attention. I've seen his billboards out. Seems like he's been able to raise a little bit of money, but has also pumped a lot of his own money into his campaign to pay for some of these advertisements that we've seen.
So we'll see who comes out on top. All right,
we shall see.
The next district.
Moving on to District E, this is a particularly interesting race because it's sort of shaping up like a repeat of 4 years ago, in which the incumbent in the race is not the candidate that's seeing a lot of the support from the political establishment, from donors. They have really all coalesced around Oliver Thomas. Oliver Thomas is someone who had served on the city council for a number of years and was widely popular before he was indicted and went to prison on a bribery charge. He's now, come back. He served his time and is making the case that he deserves a second chance. And it seems as though, there are a good bit of folks in the city who agree with that take. He also, for many years hosted the popular WBOK Good Morning show and was able to get his name out there and his opinions out there on local politics for a good bit of years. So we'll see. There's a lot of frustration in District D or District E. A lot of folks that feel like New Orleans East and the Ninth Ward have not recovered at the same rate as has the rest of the city. So we will see what voters say tomorrow, if it is a straight runoff between the two candidates or if Oliver wins it outright.
And then statewide, I think we need to keep moving. We're going to get to these state amendments. Can you touch on those right now?
Sure. So we've got Amendment 1, which is the amendment that would allow in-state and out-of-state businesses to pay their sales taxes to a single body rather than to a host of local tax collectors, as is done now. Now, supporters of that says it's needed because the current system is way too confusing and burdensome for local businesses. But critics, including Mayor LaToya Cantrell, say that this could be a play by the state to politicize local dollars. If we allow our local dollars to go up to a state board, who's to say they won't withhold them from us if they don't like our policies, as has been done in the past. Then you have Amendment 2, which is an amendment that would essentially lower the state's income tax rate from the current 6% cap to a 4.75%, and also remove the federal income tax deduction from our state tax code, which essentially lets you deduct all your federal taxes from your state tax income. That has also gathered supporters and critics. Supporters say that the moves will make us more competitive with other states that have lower tax rates. But critics say we need all the tax revenue we can get. So let's not take it away from our schools and our local governments. So those are the two main ones that have emerged on the ballot, and voters will decide one way or the other tomorrow.
And I know you can go to PAR's website, Public Affairs Research Council, right, at parlouisiana.org, among others, to background yourselves a little bit more on those amendments. E, I'm sorry, I had to cut you short, but you wanted to make a comment?
Well, I'll just point out that District E always has turmoil, and just about every incumbent has been defeated. Okay, I mean, there's just been a lot of turmoil because it's so widespread. There are so many problems there. There are just so many people that are unhappy.
Okay.
It's a tough district to represent.
Okay, now you need to talk about Carnival and make it kind of quick.
On the happier thing, yeah, that the mayor's office is giving every indication that there will be the parades. Apparently, when they said we will look at the crew of Boo and see what the numbers show, that the numbers have been favorable. And so, and the mayor put out a statement, kind of a glowing statement. Now, it was tied in with their campaign, as a lot of people thought it would do. But even without their campaign, I think she would do well even without the Mardi Gras on this. But it seems like it is now. The unresolved question is about the parade routes, because a few weeks ago they said we may need to condense the parade routes. They haven't said anything definitive about that. And there are 2 or 3 parade routes that would be major issues if they were changed. And so that still has to be dealt with. So right now it looks like, yes, there'll be parades. Uncertain about the parade routes. But let me tell you, after COVID is gone, the thing about the parade routes, as far as it involves manpower, is going to be the issue of the future. I think this is an issue that Carnival is going to have to face every year and come up with some kind of solution.
So are crew captains being told definitely plan on it? We're going to go. What's a definite go for Mardi Gras in the city?
You know, nobody uses the word definite when talking about COVID. It's just kind of like speaking code, all right? And the code suggests that, yeah, it looks like there will be the parades.
Well, I know that's definitely going to be a welcome occurrence if we indeed do have a real Mardi Gras, as we know Mardi Gras. No, we will have a Mardi Gras because it is on the calendar, but have our carnival along with it. Okay.
And the people need it. If you'd have seen the streets the night of the crew of Boo, people just felt so good being outside and being able to be festive again.
And just getting back to life. Absolutely. Okay, E, sticking with you, other stories.
If you recall the Christmas festival that was at the convention center the last 2 years, not last year, that was postponed. Well, they announced today that it's coming back. It'll be back. Also, the bonfires along the river, at least in St. James Parish, are coming back also.
Great. Greg, let's go over to you.
Even on the heels of David's wonderful reporting on the Sewerage and Water Board, they continue to provide juicy investigative topics. Wednesday night at 6, I'm taking a look at how they've handled the damages that were court awarded from the Sela Uptown projects. Dozens of homeowners succeeded in court in winning cases for damage to their homes during these massive drainage projects, yet they're still waiting on their money. Meanwhile, the lawyers who defended those cases and an engineer have made millions.
Okay, we'll be looking for that. David, over to you.
Had another investigation this week that had a quick and surprising response from government about the library director, Gabriel Morley, found that he had a homestead exemption in Mississippi, and within a couple hours of asking about it, he resigned.
Because the residency
requirement in the city of New Orleans, which he could have gotten a waiver for, but apparently didn't request.
Okay, well, let's go over to you, Jessica, to wrap us up.
And he's a Slidell native, right?
Yes.
That was
He
so
lives in
strange.
Slidell, yeah.
Yes.
Well, one of the things that New Orleans is exploring is guaranteed income for young people. Mayor Cantrell announced this week that the city is looking at paying folks $350 a month to essentially keep them out of trouble and keep some money in their pockets. So we'll see the outcome of that next year.
Okay. All right, guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for joining us, too, and we will see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a very good evening.